Hey everyone, and an enthusiastic welcome back to this explainer. Today we are unpacking session 22 of the massive Infinitum campaign, and let me tell you, we are setting the stage for one of the most bizarre, whimsical, and honestly surprisingly emotional journeys we've seen in the campaign so far. Now, just to remind you of the absolutely insane stakes here, the Earthling players are completely trapped inside their characters' minds. They're taking a total backseat while their digital avatars are fully in the driver's seat. What makes this specific session so incredibly gripping is just how surreal the whole situation gets. You've got this group of hardened, seasoned D&D players forced to navigate a ridiculously lethal, unforgiving virtual fantasy world, and what are they relying on? A literal, crayon-drawn map scrawled by a child. That's it. It's a journey that is just packed to the brim with danger, laugh-out-loud humor, and some truly profound realizations about their digital imprisonment. We are going to explore absolutely every detail of it, so let's get into it.
Okay. Let's dive into this agenda real quick so you know where we're headed. 1. The Bluebonnet Trail. 2. The Crying Stone Giant. 3. Passing the Angry Volcano. 4. Drifting down the river. And 5. The Cave of Wonders. To give you a real sense of the day, here's a rough timeline, based on the landmarks from that childlike crayon map Sightkith provided. So, after waking up in the Mushroom Village, Sightkith actually whipped up this incredibly hearty, comforting morning fish breakfast for the group. And, the smell of roasted fish, the warmth of the village, it really set up this totally false sense of security. Because right after wiping their mouths, the Holy Crusaders set off straight into the wild. They actively decided to strictly follow the cryptic, innocent logic of this crayon map in a world that, outside the village borders, is very real, very hostile, and literally trying to kill them at every turn.
Section 1. The Bluebonnet Trail. Decoding the Path.
So our first stop naturally kicks off with the map instructing them to follow the blue path. Now they quickly deduced there wasn't going to be a literal blue paved road sitting in the middle of a forest. Instead, Zato cleverly pointed out a regular dirt trail heavily lined with beautiful blooming bluebonnets. Smart, right? Following this trail deep into the lush emerald greenery, they bump into a group of dryads picking berries. Their skin was like woven bark, with leaves cascading down like hair. But here's what's absolutely fascinating about this interaction. The dryads were openly celebrating. They were expressing immense joy at finally being free from the control of the Earthlings, obviously referring to the human players. Our heroes, who are secretly harboring those exact Earthlings screaming inside their minds, just nodded and completely played along to maintain their cover. They pretended to totally agree with these intense anti-Earthling sentiments. Crazy, right? Well, satisfied that the party were allies, the dryads generously gifted them these woven baskets just brimming with fresh, sweet blueberries. But, ironically, they had absolutely zero idea what the happy tree from the child's map was supposed to be.
Moving on, the party pushed deeper into the woods until the bluebonnets finally started to thin out. And then, suddenly, they catch the distinct, echoing sound of children laughing in the distance. They follow it, and boom, there it was, the happy tree. Just imagine the chaotic energy of this scene for a second. You have this massive, ancient, sprawling tree, and its branches are completely swarmed with kids climbing around like ants, just playing and shouting. But visually, the absolute most striking detail was the sheer scale of the fruit. This tree was bearing colossal, fist-sized blueberries. They were so incredibly heavy that the branches were literally sagging under their weight.
The kids excitedly peeked down from the branches, and they actually recognized the Holy Crusaders as the legendary heroes who took down Genghis Khan. They enthusiastically offered the party some of the ripe berries they had already picked, claiming they had these amazing healing properties. Naturally, Zato, wanting to test the tree for himself, reaches out to pluck a massive fresh berry right off a low-hanging branch. He is literally an inch away when the tonal shift hits them like a freight train. The children shrieked, urgently screaming, "The fruit on the tree still isn't ripe yet, and it could poison you." Zato just froze, his hand hovering right over a quick and incredibly painful death. It's such a brilliant, heart-pounding reminder that in this fantasy server, looks can be incredibly deceiving.
Section 2. The Crying Stone Giant. A mental hurdle.
Leaving the terrifying poison tree behind, the kids happily pointed them toward the mountains, which leads us to an encounter that was, honestly, intensely disturbing. As the party enters a rocky valley between two sheer cliff sides, the path is completely blocked by this gargantuan stone giant. But he isn't posturing to attack them or anything. Instead, these deafening, ground-shaking sobs are just echoing through the entire valley. The giant was weeping uncontrollably, burying his face in his massive stone hands. And the reason for this is incredibly tragic. You see, the giant was crying because the trapped earthling inside his mind was endlessly, constantly screaming for freedom. The sheer volume of this voice in his head was driving him absolutely crazy. This presented a major logistical hurdle for the team. They had to use their inner server radio to call Captain Chloe, the sci-fi server's leading scientist, to trek all the way out there just to administer her specific Earthling-inhibiting serum. They needed to literally silence the screams so this poor giant could just find some peace.
Now, because they were so incredibly far from the server entrance, they knew it was going to take Captain Chloe quite a while to hike out there. So the party had to set up camp in the valley. And guys, this gives us one of the absolute funniest, most chaotic moments of the entire session. Zato decides he's going to take the first watch, right? He chooses to sit in the dirt and meditate while still wearing his incredibly thick, heavy medieval plate armor. Yeah, he completely fails to notice a massive swarm of aggressive ants crawling up his legs, finding their way right between the metal plates until they start viciously biting him all at once. The absolute sheer panic of Zato desperately trying to unbuckle and tear off heavy metal chest pieces and gauntlets while literally being eaten alive was hilarious. He actually took legitimate hit point damage from this ant swarm. When Captain Chloe finally shows up hours later, completely exhausted from the hike, she takes one look at this ridiculous situation and says with utter annoyance, "You called me all the way out here for a giant that isn't even mutating yet." Antonella smoothly talks her down, convincing her to administer the serum anyway. The giant finally drifts off into a peaceful sleep, slumping over and blocking the path, but eventually he rolls just enough to let them squeeze on past.
Section 3. Passing the Angry Volcano. A deductive choice.
With the sleeping giant far behind them, the environment drastically shifts. We go from rocky valleys straight into a harsh, ashen volcanic landscape. They approach this sprawling crater area that contains not one, but 4 distinct volcanoes. They weren't actively erupting, thankfully, but each had a very unique, dangerous characteristic. One was filled to the brim with fiercely bubbling lava. Another was aggressively puffing out this thick, choking black smoke. The third was violently hissing jets of scorching steam, and the fourth had a slow-moving, intensely hot river of lava flowing directly out of its base.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it forces the players to completely abandon standard video game adventuring logic and rely entirely on a child's deductive reasoning. The map simply instructed them to pass the angry volcano. Okay, but which one is angry? The party stood there heavily debating this. Like, was the thick black smoke a sign of anger? Or maybe the bubbling lava meant it was literally boiling mad. After a ton of back and forth, the party brilliantly decided to think like a little kid. They concluded that the volcano violently hissing steam sounded the absolute most like a person furiously venting their anger.
But hey, before they could even get to that hissing volcano, they first had to physically cross the wide, molten lava river flowing from the fourth one. This is a great moment that brilliantly illustrates the varied, dynamic skill sets of the group in action. Arya and Antonella simply unfurl their wings and effortlessly soar right over the bubbling rock. Barkin, tapping into his sheer, explosive barbarian athleticism, just launches himself high into the air, clearing the dangerous gap with total ease. And Zato, well, realizing his heavy armor made a physical jump completely suicidal, he creatively summons a phase steed out of thin air to instantly blink across via teleportation. They all safely bypassed the river, though they did have to frantically weave and dodge through the random scorching bursts of hissing steam on the other side, which definitely managed to singe some of Zato's gear.
Section 4. Drifting down the river. Armor's downfall.
Moving on from the intense, suffocating heat of the volcanic ash, they journeyed until they arrived at the deafening base of a massive waterfall. This waterfall violently split the landscape into 3 separate rushing rivers. The crayon map, in all its simplicity, just told them to follow the straight river. Naturally, none of the rivers were perfectly straight, but they eyeballed the one with the least amount of curves. To follow alongside it, though, they had to leap across the rushing whitewater rapids. Once again, the sheer agility of the party shines here. Arya, Antonella, and Barkin fly and vault across the dangerous water with 0 issues. But contrast that with Zato. He severely miscalculated the sheer, restrictive weight of his heavy armor. He fails his jump completely, and with this heavy, terrifying metallic clang, he drops like a stone, plunging directly into the freezing, churning rapids.
The sheer force of the river immediately grabs Zato, violently dragging his armored body downstream. In this massive, high-stakes moment of absolute panic, Barkin sprints along the muddy bank, his muscles burning, and literally dives straight into the chaotic water to intercept him. But the current was just too fierce. Barkin ends up getting swept away too. They lock arms in the white water, thrashing around, gasping for air. Barkin, using all his incredible strength, manages to grab a thick tree branch overhanging the water. But Zato, weighed down by all that metal, completely fails to pull himself up. The branch snaps. They get dragged even further down, scraping against jagged rocks. Finally, Barkin manages to hook his arm around a second, sturdier branch. This time, with an agonizing, exhausting effort, lungs absolutely burning, Zato hauls his heavy frame out of the water, with Barkin collapsing onto the muddy bank right behind him. They were battered and completely drained. It took them hours to hike back up and reunite with the flying members of the party. In fact, it forced them to set up camp right there, just so Barkin and a now completely armorless, shivering Zato could safely dry off by a roaring campfire.
Section 5. The Cave of Wonders. A Child's Haven.
The very next day, following that winding river brought them to a massive, moss-covered boulder which finally led them to our ultimate destination. Arya's keen eyes spotted a hidden, narrow crawl space perfectly concealed behind thick, hanging vines. They squeezed inside, discovering the Cave of Wonders. And wow, the interior was breathtakingly beautiful. It was lit softly by beams of natural sunlight piercing through cracks in the ceiling, gently bouncing off these specifically placed, shiny, refracting rocks scattered all around the room. But the most striking feature, the cave walls. They were absolutely covered in bright, whimsical, childlike chalk drawings. There was a mighty, crayon red dragon, a golden treasure chest, little colorful life forms playing together, a giant pink friendship heart, and a group of brave stick-figure heroes. And upon closer inspection, the party had this wonderful, mind-blowing realization that the crude drawing of a paladin, a winged creature, and a barbarian was actually a drawing of themselves, the Holy Crusaders.
Let's move to see how this builds, because this whole environment was essentially one giant interactive playground puzzle. Investigating the chalk drawing of the treasure chest revealed a very real, clever secret compartment. Inside were actual magical boots of dexterity, which Arya happily claimed, along with a stack of more child-drawn maps. Investigating the mighty dragon drawing revealed a small cubby stuffed with wooden toys. But the absolute funniest part of the entire session happened next. They pressed the pink drawing of the friendship heart, which unexpectedly popped open a hidden compartment, dropping a magical, sentient, talking tomato right onto the cave floor. And this tomato immediately just starts screaming at them at the top of its lungs, angrily throwing insults and completely refusing to stop. Barkin, this massive barbarian who had literally just survived a near-death drowning experience and had absolutely zero patience for a goofy puzzle, didn't even hesitate. He just raises his massive fist and violently squashes the yelling tomato flat on the spot, splattering tomato juice everywhere in complete silence. Just incredible.
As they were exploring the depths of the cave, wiping up tomato juice and making sense of all these secret compartments, a single, small child quietly walks into the cave from the overgrown entrance. Standing there, clutching a piece of parchment, the child was innocent, polite, and starry-eyed. It was a massive, jarring contrast to the brutal, death trap of a world they had literally been hiking through all day. The child recognized the Holy Crusaders immediately and actually asked for their autographs, which our battle-weary heroes gladly provided.
And this brings us to the incredibly profound conclusion of this explainer. The child, looking up at these powerful heroes, softly explains exactly why this hidden cave exists in the first place. They deliver this utterly heartbreaking quote. They say, "We come to this cave to play with the earthling in our minds in private, where adults can't see us. We wish both of us could be free." You see, the adult NPCs in the Infinitum server vehemently despise the trapped Earthlings. They view them as a plague, but the innocent children, they just want to play with the voices in their heads, hiding away in this beautiful cave of wonders to protect them. It is a massive, stunning tonal whiplash, taking us from the slapstick comedy of squashing a talking tomato straight into confronting the dark, incredibly sad reality of their digital imprisonment. It leaves us with a truly provocative thought. As the Holy Crusaders rest their tired bones in his quiet cave, you have to wonder, will the pure innocence and hidden compassion of these digital children be the ultimate key to finally freeing the trapped humans of Earth? Thank you so much for exploring this deeply moving session with me, and hey, keep your minds open.